Good morning everyone. Basa na tayo ng ating History of the Filipino People by Agoncillo and Guerrero. Today is 10 January 2023. History of the Filipino People Part 3, Reform and Revolution. Topic number 14, the Religious Schism. Nandito tayo sa paragraph Aglipay and the Jesuits. Kahapon dapat to kaya lang sobrang haba kaya pinuto ko na guys. Ngayon ko babasahin. Aglipay and the Jesuits. Aglipay was martyred at the inclusion of his name as the Supreme Bishop of the new church, for he was at the time in conference with the Jesuits in a last attempt to prevent a schism. Knowing that Aglipay was influential with the Filipino clergy, the Jesuits, through Dr. Leon Maria Guerrero and Joaquin Luna, invited Aglipay to an interview at the Jesuit house in Santa Ana, Manila. The Jesuits chose Father Francisco Dada, a Spaniard and author of a book on the Philippines, to work on the Filipino priests. For 4 days, Dada exerted all his power of persuasion to win back Aglipay to the Catholic fold, although Aglipay had not as yet definitely given up his Catholic faith. On the 5th day, Dada handed Aglipay a document for his signature. The document apparently was a confession of Catholic faith, a return to Catholicism, and in a way a retraction of what he had done. Aglipay studied the document, and when Dada returned in the afternoon, he had not as yet signified his intention of signing the document. Dada promised that if he would sign it, he would be appointed bishop or archbishop with a large sum of money thrown in. Aglipay wanted an assurance that by signing the document, the problem of the Filipino Catholic priest would be solved, which is to say that the Filipino clergy would be appointed to the posts formerly held by the Spanish regulars. With closed eyes, said Aglipay, I would sign this document not for servile gallantry, but for consolidating the religious peace in my country. But can you assure me, Father, that with the publication of this document, the situation of the friars in the country will be saved? Can you guarantee at least that with the signing of this document, the problem of the native priest will be solved? Dada, overconfident and overbearing, replied, Why do you mind so much the Filipino priests, since all the world knows that they are vicious and hopelessly inefficient? Aglipay trembled with savage fury. He turned to the arrogant Spaniard. They were facing each other across a round table. Aglipay, in the heat of the moment, reached for Dada, but failed. He then lunged at him, held him by the nape of his neck, and shouted, Either you withdraw that odious calumny, Father Dada, or at this moment I'll forever end all your slanderous impertinences. The arrogant Spaniard, terrified at the Filipino's wrath, fell on his knees, trembling and clasping his hands. Here indeed was a partial reenactment of the scene in the Noli, wherein the insolent Fray Damaso, held by the occiput by Ibarra, and on his knees not to pray but to await death by the blade, held even his breath, for fear Ibarra might mistake it for his impertinent answer. The commotion that followed and angry Phoenicians of Aglipay attracted Dr. Leon Maria Guerrero. So yun reenactment pala ng Father ni Fray Damaso at sa iba doon sa nalimitang here guys is pala talaga yan. Nangyari din kay Aglipay at kay sino ba yung si Dada. Okay, ulit. Here indeed was a partial reenactment of the scene in the Noli, wherein the insolent Fray Damaso, held by the occiput by Ibarra, and on his knees not to pray but to await death by the blade, held even his breath for fear Ibarra might mistake it for his impertinent answer. The commotion that followed the angry fulminations of Aglipay attracted Dr. Leon Maria Guerrero and Joaquin Luna to the room. Aglipay, thinking that Luna came to succor the embattled Jesuit, turned to him, saying, "Do not intervene in this affair, for it is not your concern. Remember that the blood of your brother is still fresh in our folds. If that precious blood had been shed, if our revolution took place, it was because of the system of spoliation practiced by Rome, which drove our people to risk all perils and sacrifice to emancipate our land from monastic oppression." So, si Joaquin Luna, guys, is kapatid ni Antonio Luna yung pinatay. Diba? A so-called representative of Christ, this man, instead of deploring the monstrous blunders, a so-called representative of Christ, this man, instead of deploring the monstrous blunders of bureaucracy, of which he is a member, still insists in offending in my face the sacred dignity of our race. Turning to Foradada, who was still trembling, Aglipay blurted out, "Your provocative insults took off the mask from your face. I am now convinced that the ecclesiastical authorities of Rome are incapable of dealing justly with the Filipinos. Now I leave this building, and bear in mind that within 3 days you will hear from this Filipino priest named Aglipay. By that time you will learn how to respect the character and efficiency of the Filipinos, for I will prove that we are able not only to administer dioceses, but also to establish modern churches free from all foreign interference." Aglipay left the Jesuit house. The break with Rome was now complete. Years later, the Jesuits tried their best to repair the damage done by Foradada. Through F.T.O. Rogers, they once more invited Aglipay to a conference. This time, the conference was to take place at Rogers' house in Intramuros. Father Joaquin Villalonga was chosen to deal with Aglipay, who was accompanied by the young Aglipayan priest Santiago Ponasier. Villalonga was diplomatic and earnestly urged Aglipay to return to the Catholic fold and forget the new church. The Pope, he said, was interested in avoiding a religious schism. Furthermore, he added, "Anything you ask will be granted by His Holiness on condition that you help bring to an end this schismatic movement you initiated." Expressing his appreciation of Villalonga kind words, Aglipay answered, "As for me, I do not want anything, because it is enough for me to look at the mountains of my country to make me feel that I am the richest man in the world. I only ask justice and sincere love for my people. The Philippine Independent Church, of which I am the head, is spreading throughout the archipelago, and its object is no other than the reestablishment of the rational worship of the only one God in all His splendor, and at the same time to prove to the world the ability of the Filipinos to enjoy an independent religious life." Father Gregorio answered Villalonga, It seems impossible to me that in so short a time you have run a greater distance than Savonarola, Luther, and Calvin along the perilous slope of heresy. I trust, nevertheless, that when you are finally consecrated bishop or archbishop with full powers to administer the rich interest of the military, you will be convinced, and the Filipino people too, that His Holiness is willing to deal equitably with everybody. Upon your decision depends the eternal salvation of millions of souls, since with the proposal I make, the Mother Church has gone up to the maximum of possible crowds. "Please do not speak to me of salvation," Aglipay exclaimed. "This problem is very debatable and much discussed too, and to me it seems improper for serious people to speak to me of grants like those offered to me by Father Porarada, your brother Jesuit. I seek not for my personal betterment. What I am after is justice and truth. Though you tempt me with meters and millions, I am compelled by my conscience to refuse." The conversation went on until Aglipay saying that since Villalonga wanted to help him, would he therefore give him 1,000 pesos? "I have not that amount with me," said the Jesuit. "What?" Aglipay exclaimed. "No sooner had I tried to verify the veracity of your reiterated desire to help me than you confessed that You do not have 1,000 pesos, an amount which is hardly enough for postage stamps necessary to inform the people of our church of your proposition. Well, in order to show that Aglipay loves you, to ask me for any amount, and I shall readily give it to you. Father Villalonga took the bait, and if he said, I asked for the moon, if you asked me the moon, came the swift answer, I would give it to you this very instant in a silver tray. Impossible. It is stupid and silly to ask for the impossible, Father Villalonga. If you asked the moon of me, I would find it for you, since I consider you a judicious person. But in view of your complete and admitted worthlessness, I am constrained to end this conversation. The Philippine Independent Church will go on, and neither the Pope nor all the Jesuits living now and hereafter will be able to impede it. Aglipay will live and die as poor as when he was born, but he will never betray the interest of his people. Good night. So ended the Jesuit attempts to make him return to the Catholic fold. Aglipay had burned all the bridges behind him. Aglipay's consecration as bishop. Aglipay's first conference with the Jesuits made him realize the futility of staying outside the new church, which elected him supreme bishop. His next step was to persuade the American Protestants in Manila to join him in his plan to divide the ranks of the Catholics and to persuade them to join his church. But the American Protestants were at the time enjoying the feeling of superiority to the Filipino churchman and consequently did not do anything to help him. They considered the Filipino church too Roman in its ritual and too rationalistic in its theology. With this failure, Aglipay had no other alternative than to accept officially the post of Supreme Bishop of the Independent Church. In September 1902, bishops were consecrated by the new church. Aglipay then accepted the position to which he was elected, and on October 1, he presided over the meeting of the council which was to frame the constitution of the Filipino Church. He celebrated his first Mass as Supreme Bishop on October 26. On January 18, 1903, he was consecrated Supreme Bishop by the bishops of Isabela, Cagayan, Pangasinan, Abra, Nueva Ecija, Cavite, and Manila. The Filipino Independent Church was on its way to proselytize in its homeland, a church that was free to develop as it saw fit without any interference from either the Pope or his representatives. Bukas na yung significance, guys. Kasi maaabutan tayo ng oras. Tapos, ay basahin ko na lang para bukas ano tayo. Okay lang na magdagdag tayo ng oras. Significance born of the Revolution. The movement for a Filipino national church independent of Rome was a reaction of the national press to centuries of disparagement and prejudice. The Spanish prejudice had two bases. First, the feeling of racial superiority, and second, the alleged incompetence of the Filipino clergy. As to the first basis, the Spanish friars could not admit that the colored Filipinos were or could be the equal of the white Spaniards. As to the second basis, the Spaniards had some justification in thinking the Filipinos were incompetent, for doubtless the early Filipino clergy were not rigorously trained for their duties. But the Filipino secular clergy of the second half of the 19th century were well trained and had all the earmarks of efficiency and competence in religious matters. Since the Spanish friars had a racial prejudice against the Filipinos, they considered the competence of the Filipino clergy purely mythical. In the circumstances, the Filipino clergy sided with the revolutionists, not because they really sympathized with the latter, but because they found in the revolutionary movement a timely opportunity to succeed the Spanish friars as wielders of power and authority. In other words, by joining the revolution, which they thought would be successful, the Filipino clergy wanted to take the place of the Spanish friars and so become powerful not only in religious but also in political matters. The Spanish racial prejudice was so great that it was impossible for the friars to overcome it. They considered the Filipinos incapable of learning and so insisted on the perpetuation of the old regime under which the Filipino clergy remained their servants. Even in the face of military defeat, the friars could not bring themselves to believe in the necessity of changing the status quo. It is for this reason that many of them handled the Mausers and Remingtons. When the tide of battle was going against the colonial government, they had to fight without shedding off their cassocks, for they were fighting for the continuance of their power and authority in Philippine society. It was this bold-headed refusal to accept the reality of changing conditions that was responsible for the alienation of the Filipino clergy from the Catholic Church in the Philippines. Aglipay exhausted all means to prevent a break with Rome, but the church authorities tried to divide the Filipinos by courting, flattering, and attempting to bribe Aglipay, the leader of the secessionist movement, in the fond belief that, as in the past, promises of honor and lucre would tempt the leader into betraying the Filipino cause. Unfortunately for them, the nationalist movement had reached its apex, and Aglipay, one of its mainstreams, was a man of integrity whose convictions were not for sale. The revolution then had two results. First, the liquidation of the Spanish Empire in the Orient, and second, the alienation of a segment of the population from the Catholic Church. Whatever the real motives of the Filipino clergy in joining hands with the revolutionists, the fact remains that the religious schism which led to the establishment of the Philippine Independent Church was the most important result of the Filipino struggle for national emancipation. The revolution started as a political upheaval. It ended as a religious triumph. The founding of the Filipino Church showed finally that the Filipino clergy had a long last come of age. Bukas na yung part for the American period, guys. Bye everyone. God bless.